Hey guys, it's Matt and John here, and we are doing the first ever Back in My Day. So, John, today we are talking about DLC in video games. Now, John, if anyone's listening to the audio version, say words so that people know that you can say that like I'm allowing you to speak.
Words so that
He's not.
you know that Matt is allowing me to speak.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows he's not being held against his will. John, you're not being held against your will, John.
I am absolutely not being held against my will.
Great. I'm happy that people know that now. So, we're talking about DLC in gaming. Now, if you guys don't know, if you haven't watched some of our other videos on our YouTube channel, Those Guys Play, John, your experience with games is a very older experience. So you're older than me by 8 years, correct?
Yeah,
I'm
give
27.
Give or take.
I'm 27. Whenever I say your age, he gets mad at me because I'm always overshooting it.
No, you're about 8 years.
Okay, so you started with Super Nintendo games?
Yes.
Normally, one would say NES for someone of your age.
Yeah, no, I sat out the NES.
You had a ColecoVision.
I did have
at one point.
Weirdly, in the early '90s, I did have a Coleco. Yes, it was.
Okay. Super Nintendo. And then I also got started on Super Nintendo, but I have continued my gaming. But you petered out at the PS2.
Yeah, I stopped really. I kind of left the console game after the PS2. I used the PS2 for a lot of years, but then I didn't really continue to buy new consoles after that. It was really just handhelds or nothing.
Do you still have a PS2?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I legit thought he stopped at PlayStation 1.
It's gathering dust somewhere in the house,
Right.
but I do have it still.
Is it the fat one or the skinny one?
It's the fat one. It's
Okay.
the original. The original model.
Okay, so question, John. Do you know what I'm a 27-year-old? I continued gaming, still do today. Do you know what a DLC is?
I don't think you could say that on a family rated video, honestly.
Okay. So I think that John doesn't know what a DLC is.
Downloadable content.
Correct. Okay, so do you know what DLC entails?
It's when after the game is released at regular intervals, new content becomes available. Whether it's new characters, new costumes, new missions, which you then you pay usually a modest fee to download it into your game.
Usually a modest fee. So then he definitely has not been keeping up with DLC. So, the reason why we wanted to make this video though is just coming from someone who I'm shocked that you knew what DLC was. Honest to God, I know because sometimes when we talk about things, you sound 80.
It does depend.
No, we were just talking about something today, and it was a pop culture thing, and he knew about it. And I said, John, how do you know about this? I'm like, who do you know that knows about this? And he knew about it because he's like, oh yeah, they were on the Late Show, and I was like, all right, that's how John knew. I was like, that's how John knows.
Okay, yeah, so that probably didn't help I gained a few youth points and then quit.
Yes.
Promptly lost them. She was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night.
But yes, DLC, and I wanted to define it only because there might be some people who do know it, maybe some who don't, who have been keeping up, again, a bit more like you, John. But either way, we want to talk about this because back in our day, especially for some of the younger, the youths, the ones who do know who Billie Eilish is, who are watching this, might think that DLC is like so commonplace, it's become so just kind of engulfed, engrossed in your gaming experience. But back in our day, it really was not like that at all. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, we don't want to sound like old fogies and try to act like the internet didn't exist, because that's silly. Of course there was internet. Of course we had things like the Satellaview, the Sega Channel, and even the Nintendo 64 DD, although we didn't get 2 out of 3 of those.
No, we didn't get the DD. Well, nobody got the DD. I think it was completely canceled.
Well, no. It was in Japan.
It
Yeah.
was? Oh,
yeah, we just didn't get we didn't get it in the US.
Satellaview was Japan only.
For the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, Sega Channel
existed. It existed both in I think it existed in Japan, but I know it existed in the US, and there were some games released for that in English that we never got here. So Rystar was a game that not Rystar. Or maybe it is. You guys will know what it is. You'll see it flashing on the screen in post. Either way, this was a game that was completely translated in English, and it never came out on cartridge. So when you shut your system off, and it erased the data as it's always supposed to every time you shut it off, you lost the game forever. So unless someone has their system on for the last like 30 years,
That's the other thing too, is that it's not like you can find it again. It's gone. You didn't own any physical part of it. It was
thankfully the Satellaview, you could save them onto cartridges. So those, if you find them in the wild, they can their data can be ripped. So Satellaview stuff, which at the time also for some of them were broadcasts in Japan for Satellaview.
Yeah, they were like time limited events.
Yeah, so you can play the Zelda game at 6 p.m. and they would like stream it directly to your console at 6 p.m. If you want to consider that DLC, again, like some of it is some of them were add-ons to other games for the DD. I mean, you could argue some of the stuff for the Satellaview was really its own, thing. But I don't want to sit here and say that we didn't have, any type of internet connection. That would be silly. But I wanted to also talk about this because your experience, John, with the Street Fighter series. Nowadays, if you have a new Street Fighter, and there's a lot of controversy with Street Fighter V, and some people consider its lack of roster, at least at launch. Because back in the day, people, had this mentality, which I don't necessarily disagree with, of if you had a fighting game, it had all of its characters in there.
And maybe you had to unlock some of them, but they were all in the game.
They were all in the game. You didn't have to pay extra on top of it. But there is a certain caveat that some people, and again, maybe some of the youths may not know or may have potentially forgotten. John, as a Street Fighter fan, could you tell me about the fact that...
The Street Fighter 2 series?
Yeah, just Street Fighter 2 So you would have situations where a new game would be released, and it would be on the same engine. It would have almost all of the same characters, but a few would be different, and then they would tell you, give us $60.
Well, what it was, and it's fair. It's only fair to mention that the Street Fighter games were first and foremost, they were arcade games.
Of course.
And with the arcade games, it was easier to release updated versions because in a lot of cases, they ran off of the same. Or a lot of similar hardware or a similar chipset. Again,
to be fair, in an arcade, you're going to the arcade. So yes, you are putting in quarters, but there's also a communal experience. You're also probably getting either some pizza or you're getting some, you're getting some burgers.
You're dancing with Chuck E. Cheese.
You're dancing with Chucky.
You're eating $7 cardboard pizza. You're playing Champion Edition. Life is grand.
You know Chucky. I know Chucky. We all know Chucky. All right.
But so with the Street Fighter games, that when they wanted to make like incremental updates to the game by either adding new characters, new not really more like costume colors, new moves. Essentially, from the perspective of a home port buyer, you're buying the game all over again.
Basically.
Every time that, like I said, but then it's ultimately up to the individual buyer. Are these additional features worth? Are you enough of a diehard of the game that matters to you, or are you happy with the original? And I said that's completely up to you. But of course, me being who I was, I had to have the 4 boss characters when they came out.
So, I don't have the sales numbers in front of me, but I would argue that off of John's back, Capcom definitely completely made that series worthwhile.
I paid for somebody's yacht. I got to tell you, just like I said, I could probably build a house out of the versions of that in Final Fantasy IV that I bought. But
oh my god.
So it was, and then what ended up happening with the home ports was, I think for a little while there, each year a new, and the home ports came out behind behind the arcade games, but like each year you'd buy one, and then the following summer, another version would come out that was the same basic game, but again, new characters, new stages, and et cetera, et cetera. So
and that's what you have to think about, though, John, right? If done responsibly, and I understand some people think that DLC is not done responsibly nowadays, but if done responsibly, what would you rather have? Would you rather have to pay an extra $60 or $40 for a new game every year? Or would you rather have a situation where you get a full enough roster and then pay an additional $20 season pass to get those 5 characters? Again, if done responsibly.
I consider myself, I don't think I'm quite as I fancy myself as being a little less cynical than the average gamer. But from my point of view, the fact that the game is constantly growing, that I'm okay with. Like I said, as if it was one of those things where like, oh, there's 3 characters, and to have the game be worthwhile or be any fun, you have to shell out the bucks. No, as it stands, the game is perfectly playable, perfectly fine. You can have a great time with it. But if you want to continue to add to the roster, if you want to have a continually changing game experience, that's cool. I said I appreciate that. I like the fact that and then like with Smash Brothers, it's a big deal when a new character is announced.
And to be fair, Smash Brothers I think did it right because I have Smash Brothers Ultimate. You're referring to Ultimate.
Ultimate, right? Which already has a huge roster, and these are just extras.
It brought everyone back from every single game. That's actually a bit of a rarity nowadays because what I do feel like has happened is sadly because of a reliance on DLC. You do have a situation where it still, in a sad way, kind of harkens back to paying $60 per game every year because what happens is instead of having, let's say, 30 characters, you have 20.
Right.
Or you have 15. And then you have to pay for every other one in a $20 update for every 5.
Well, and as I said, like you said, if it's handled tastefully, the thing is that it depends on how much the content costs.
But,
are you paying, you're hopefully you're not paying the full price of another game for this additional content. It's $5 here, $10 here, which, as I'm sure we all know, can add up. But it's not like, okay, pay additional money to enjoy this game. It's like
and that's what I've started to notice that I don't like. And this is, you could argue this is not DLC, but in a way I guess I argue that it folded into it microtransactions in full $60 games. So this idea that with this game you can't just let's look at the new.
What's a paywall? That's something else. That's like in order to.
But here's the thing though, you could argue it's something else, but it's still downloadable content that adds on to a game's experience, I would argue. And also, I'm referring to it as, for a game that's already... Because, Pokemon Go, you get that for free.
Right.
However, with the newest Crash Team Racing game, there are some stuff that you can pay to get extra in-game currency to help you unlock more characters.
That ends up being a bit of a racket, is that when there's in-game currency that...
But the game is a full $40. It's not free. Deej got that game.
I think I got them that, actually.
John, how dare you?
Crash Team Racing.
On the Switch. How dare you,
I'm a corporate
how dare you,
tool.
John?
But no, and like I said, even in that case, the problem the problem, and it is a little bit distressing to see that in a game that you buy.
Yeah.
If the game's already free, and then you kind of there's a certain point where you hit a paywall. That's understandable because it's kind of like you're trying it and then you're buying it. Like in order to fully, which listen, Pokemon Go and some of the other ones that I mentioned, you can fully enjoy it without spending any real life money.
Back in our day, no microtransactions. We won. That
was it.
We won. What's under millennials? What's the next one? Because I'm a millennial. I think you're technically a millennial too.
I'm a millennial too. For a little while, they were calling us Gen Y.
Okay, but what's under us?
Or what's after us? Or,
yeah.
I guess Gen Z would be.
We gotcha. No microtransactions during our times, because literally no internet connection existed, but not really to our consoles for the most part. Because PS1, if I remember correctly, no online multiplayer, unless I'm wrong.
PS1.
Yeah. PS2 did, but I'm pretty sure PS1 did not.
PS1 didn't have, to my knowledge, any online functionality.
Yes. PS2 did.
PS2 definitely did. Dreamcast did if you bought the additional accessory.
Right, that is true.
And so on.
Phantasy Star Online took a lot of people's summers.
And then, although I feel kind of silly that I did talk about Street Fighter as an example, because when you're in an arcade, technically just playing the game is a microtransaction.
I mean, but it's not in the same way. But still, it's a different.
And also, it's not like you're buying the home version. And then okay.
That's the issue. Is that
25 cents until you die, kind of 25 an additional 25 cents for a continue.
I mean that's fair, but no, but again, I'd rather take 25 cents rather than the $60 plus an additional 20 or 40 or something along those lines. Either way, though. It's interesting, though, seeing how, and I was talking to you about this before we even started talking about this on camera, or on audio if you're listening to this through our Patreon, thank you so much. The fact that now we have DLC that's announced before the game even comes out. So to compare that to our Street Fighter example, how funny would it be if before the first game comes out, they're like, in a year from now, you could get these 3 characters in this new game for $60. You'd be like,
my
what?
pet
You'd be
theory
like,
is that, let's take that to another level.
Oh, God.
They don't even tell you what the game is. Somebody just runs in and screams, "You can be M. Bison in this one." Okay, great. What game is that?
Just literally just on Twitter, you just have Insomniac.
M. Bison.
No, Insomniac is like, Spider-Man! You're like, okay, thanks. $60 Spider-Man! Okay, thank you.
And then for $60, you can be everybody else. It's good news. You can be Spider-Man for $10. If you want to be anybody else, it's a...
But Spider-Man is actually a great example. I'm happy I brought it up. Thank you, me. The newest Spider-Man game, which, by the way, it was bought for me. Satish, contributor to the channel, actually got it for me for my birthday, and it was beautiful because he also had some, like, at the time, Best Buy had a rewards program, so he was like, "I got it for you, but only for $33," and it was brand new. It just came out that week.
Points? I didn't know they got rid of that.
Well, I think it was because it was too good. You got a $60 game for $33. How do you make money off that?
Oh yeah, that's
too
I mean, good for the consumer,
good.
but not so much for the bottom line.
Yeah. So he sent that to me for my birthday, like when it came out that month, which I think at this point has been like, not even last year. I thought it was the year before that. Anyway, point is that I get the game. And then I learned that, I was like, oh, there's DLC for this, that's cool. And then I learned the DLC was announced before it even came out. So it's like, so people, of course, were very wary of that. They were worried that it wasn't going to be a full experience. And I think that's really the difference between, back in our day and now, is that while there were instances where games didn't have full experiences, we just chalked it up to that, not that dev team necessarily, but the company that produced it. Oh, they suck. We will never go back to them again. Now it turns into, well, we don't have a full experience, but if you pay the extra money, maybe we do.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. There's a big difference between hiding content behind a paywall and continuing to build on the game. Especially because, I said, there's a lot of games that I played that you hear a lot of. I said I'm a big devlore junkie, so you hear a lot about. Oh, they would have put this in the game, but they ran out of time. They would have put this in the game, but they ran out of memory. Like there's always a lot of like what could have beens. And with DLC, ideally, there's the possibility that you don't get as much of that because they can always, even if it doesn't make it into the game on launch. There's always the chance that they can put it in later on, and
and that's in a good way. That's a positive, a very optimistic way of looking at it. And I want to say, speaking of Spider-Man again, I really do enjoy how I felt like personally it was building on the game. I don't think that the game, the DLC took away from the main game. But sadly, it's mostly, I would argue it's the norm at this point, that it does feel like certain games, I mean, even stuff like something like the Star Wars Battlefront series, the newest two, there was a lot of controversy surrounding not just microtransactions, but also season passes.
Pay a bunch of money to be Darth Vader.
Yes, but also with season passes where, it's a situation where you have, you pay $60 for the game. And then it's like, but would you like the golden standard edition? And you're like, sure, what is that? Well, you can actually gain access to X, Y, and Z and more of this and weapon here. And that's another $40. So you're like, wait, am I paying $100 for something that back in the PS2 Battlefront series was considered the norm?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is it an extra, or is it like an integral part of the game where it's like, oh, do you want to keep playing? Give me $20. Like, there's a guy that just, it's like having somebody come in, turn your console off, and be like, for $30, I'll plug it back in. Like, and that's where you're kind of holding content for ransom rather than just giving you a complete experience, and then it's just the icing on the cake. It's a little bit extra.
Either way, before we wrap this thing up, just want to say, in the off chance that this wasn't really kind of shown through us talking about this, we're not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. Like, we're just telling you how things were back when we were playing early on in our childhood, or for John's case, in his teenage years. Because I was a kid at the time, but you were in your teenage years, old man. Things were different back then, but we're not even necessarily saying that it's better simply because, John, you were telling me this off camera, is that it's such a huge contrast between, are you going to have a static one-off experience with this game that, hey, could just generally be shitty, or a new game, and this is me jumping in with this, a new game that even it actually is pretty good, and then you're adding on to that experience with new stories, new worlds. I mean, when it comes to games that are like MMORPGs like Final Fantasy 14 or I wouldn't say Monster Hunter is MMO because you can still play it single player, but
Warcraft,
or like even a Warcraft too. The idea, yes, they do actually. John doesn't know. They just re-released the original Warcraft on PC.
or
I don't know if they did it for free or not, but they released the original Warcraft again on PC, World of Warcraft. So people were losing their minds because I don't know if they still had their original accounts, but it became Leroy Jenkins again, all over again. It was
we got to go back to 2000.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was kind of funny. I didn't play Warcraft then, and I'm not playing it now, but it felt...
Back to 2008, that's a horrible thing to say.
But it felt... It's not back in your day, it's back in the middle of the days. It's not like the good days. It's not the good old days, it's not the bad times.
Not recent enough that we remember it very clearly, but not long enough ago that we're nostalgic about it.
But anyway, so again, I don't want to say that, back in our day it was better. No, we're just basically telling you, hey, this is how it was for us. Here are some, examples. And clearly this is how things have changed. Now, I will admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the changes. But again, only when they're not done well. If you feel like they've been done well, I would suggest if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, again, Those Guys Play, comment down below and talk about DLC done well nowadays. Give us some recommendations. Maybe I can lend John my PS4. You can finagle it a bit, see how it works on your TV, and you can actually play some good DLC. Because I feel like nowadays we just consistently get hit with bad news, where even though John hasn't kept up, still you've been throwing stuff in this video where I'm like, yeah, how do you know about that, John?
That's just from cultural osmosis. It's just from being around and hearing people talk and having my toe in the water
of how bad some of this DLC has gotten.
And also I'm on social media just enough to see all the complaints. So I may know nothing about a game, but I do know what people don't like about it.
Social media. That's an entirely different back in my day, honestly. But either way, thank you all so much for watching or listening in. Again, if you're on the YouTube channel, please remember to like and subscribe. And comment about your experiences on DLC, if you think it's done good or if it's done bad. Tell us what you think down in the comment section down below. Love you all. Take care and tune in next time for another Back in My Day with Matt and
John, and I will DLC you later.
That was beautiful. Oh, that was beautiful.
You have to cap it off with a dad joke if we're going to do this Back in My Day spiel.
That's true.